to kind of piggyback off that question, we have a question that relates to that, and this one will be directed to you, Mr. Vickers. The question is, much of the campaign rhetoric that has gone out from both campaigns has challenged the use of donations and support from entities outside of the boundaries of this seat. What is your stance on the issue?
Well, it's expensive to run a campaign. Let's just face it. I found that up close and personal this time. This is without a doubt the most difficult personal thing that I've ever done in taking on this challenge. It's a bigger issue. It's a bigger area to cover. So physically, you have more to do. You have more people to reach. You have 95,000 people to reach instead of 36. So it's expensive, And what I've tried to do is balance that. And I challenge you to go to the website right now. The only fair comparison is to look at how much money has come into the campaign since the campaign started, which is realistically right after the session started. If you look at that, in our fundraising efforts, we've had to go to corporations to get money. I've gone to my personal self to get money. I've gone to many, many people in this community to get money. So you have to do it at a broad base. If you look at that, at this point in time, 76% of the money that I've collected has come from inside this community, inside this Senate district. It's a high percentage. I'm working hard to maintain that. We had a breakfast not too long ago with 140 people there. We raised a significant amount of money in doing that. People have been willing to contribute. So my position is, yes, you're going to have to take some outside money to do this because it's the nature of the beast. It's just too expensive not to. But you need to balance that with as much money within the district as you possibly can. And I've been able to do that. And I challenge you to go look and see how those comparisons are.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a fair comparison to only count a couple months out of over 4 years of legislative service. And what I think is important is looking at the entire lifetime, not only with campaign contributions, but also with legislative bills and your voting record. I've served in the Senate for 1 year. Representative Vickers has been in the legislative, in the House for over 4 years. And what was looked at is his campaign contributions for his entire lifetime service in the state legislature. And if you look at that information from the day he was first elected until the end of this 2012 general session, 98% of his campaign contributions came from outside of the district. Now, I don't take issue with that, but I do think that it's important that we show some level of local support. Because when you go up to the legislature and a lobbyist asks you to vote away on a bill, I'm not saying Representative Vickers does this, but I've experienced this pressure firsthand. And it's very difficult to overwhelm that kind of support. Unfortunately, our campaigns are overly dependent on campaign contributions. It costs a lot of money to run a primary campaign, and that's, I highly respect Representative Vickers. I as well, this has been an incredibly difficult thing for my family and I to do, but I feel like that me having the highest percentage of campaign contributions that come from my own district, to me that's an important issue.
And I appreciate that, and I know that what he's saying is true when it started the first session. But let me point out, there's a few inaccuracies there. If you want to take a lifetime, go ahead and add up all the contributions that I've had and that he's had, and let's look at that. Okay, I can tell you this, if you were to add that all up right now, everything's been reported in my lifetime in the legislature, and his, my percentage of local money is going to be well over 50%. His is going to be well below. So, I'm not challenging that as an individual, nothing else. I'm just pointing out there's an inaccuracy there. I suggest that you go to disclosures.utah.gov, do the public search, find out for yourself.
Just to clarify, the information that I had been given did not include our own contributions to ourselves. My opponent's put $30,000 of his own money into this race. I think that that's valiant. I simply cannot afford to do that. I don't know if he's counting that in his local contributions or not. But if the disclosures.utah.gov website, I went and clicked on it again. It's not showing complete data. I called Mark Thomas from the Lieutenant Governor's office. They're working to fix that problem. There was a website database transition, but I'm confident that they'll update that. And if you look at all 4 years of legislative service, up until the end of this session, 98% of my opponent's campaign contributions come from outside of the district, primarily Salt Lake County.
All right, our next question will start with you, Mr. Anderson, and the question is this. You both actually voted for a sex ed bill that was opposed by educators, parent groups, and others. The bill was passed and then vetoed by the governor. If given an opportunity to do it all over, would you vote the same or different?
Well, this is one of those bills where, some legislators choose to run and hide, and they understand that it's a tough position to take. It's not something that I would ever bring up or advocate for. Essentially, there was an issue in Davis County School District where the legislators up there felt like there was some material that was being taught that was inappropriate, that was pushed by Planned Parenthood. It turns out that wasn't entirely true. That's not a bill that I wholeheartedly supported. I would probably vote different if it was brought up again. And I know Representative Vickers shares those sentiments, I believe. So.
Yes, the bill, when it came to the House, it was a House bill. There was a lot of discussion about that bill. There was a lot of inaccuracies in that bill. There was some information that was given to us that led me to believe that there was some websites that were directing both children and parents to some very inappropriate material. And that's why I voted for the bill. Now, I found out shortly after, when it was on the way to the Senate, that those things that had been presented to us were not true, that they had been already taken care of. So, in hindsight, no, I would not have voted for that bill, and I support the governor's veto as well as almost all the legislature. When they called for that, to see if they wanted to look at a veto override, it was a very, very low percentage. I think that we all kind of realized that we kind of got snookered on that. So, no, here again, it's one of those things. You deal with the information you have at hand. Sometimes you come pretty fast and furious. You make the vote the best way you feel like you can. And there's one savvy politician once told me, if you never look back and see you haven't made a mistake, then you're lying. I just think it's important to point out that this is what's so important about the way that our country is founded upon. Checks and balances. We have a state house, we have a state senate, we have a governor. And that bill made it through the state house, made it through the state senate, and more information came forward, and the governor vetoed it. If we were passionate about it, we could have called a special session, we could have overrode the veto with a 2/3 vote. But that's something that I'm very passionate about our country, is maintaining those systems of checks and balances. It's something that's continually being eroded at the federal level, and I disagree with that. I think we need to continue to reassert just the importance of having a separation of powers. Thank you.
All right, this question will be directed to you, Mr. Vickers, and I mentioned this to the candidates before, but I said if there were a couple questions that were directed to specific candidates, we would try and get those questions as well. So this question is directed specifically to you, and then I have a question directed specifically to you, Senator Anderson. But you are welcome if you would like to have a rebuttal afterwards, if you'd like to make comments on this question. All right, Mr. Vickers, this question comes from the audience. I've addressed you in the past about rental units, having the trouble in paying the expense to evict people who have broken contracts or have done things inside the apartments. You have not acknowledged this problem as a state representative. How will you handle it if elected as a state senator?
And I appreciate the question, and I know the audience member that's asking this, and I'm here to tell you that I've not just ignored it. I've looked into it. It's a hard discussion. It's a hard issue to look at. It's a property owner's right, and and I feel badly for his situation. I probably haven't addressed it the very best way I could. But I promise that, if I get the opportunity, I will continue to work on that. I have had numerous discussions with a number of people in the legislature that know a lot more about this than I do, and I really have not been able to come to a resolution that I feel is appropriate that would help him. So, with that said, I will continue to work with it on those arenas and trying to help find a solution for it.
Well, I feel like my primary responsibility as an elected official is to protect your right to life, liberty, and property. And if you're a landlord and you own a property, I believe that that's your property, and I don't have a right to tell you what you can or cannot do with your property. When that comes, obviously at the local level would be better as far as zoning laws and such. But there was a bill that was brought before us at the state legislature this year dealing with non-discrimination ordinances that would have further restricted the rights of property owners. And as a landlord myself, I know that I want to be able to rent my property to people who I feel like are going to take care of it, and that aren't going to ruin it, and do things that my family and I might disagree with. So that's something that comes up every single year, is protecting the rights of property owners. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I think it's something, if we protect property owners, it'll help grow our economy and strengthen our economy here in Utah. So I think it benefits everybody to protect the rights of property owners.
You know, it goes without said that, when it comes down, we have some tough decisions for legislators. Sometimes you have to make a decision versus, you have gun control against law enforcement, you have property rights, versus renters' rights. You have all these very, very tough decisions, and sometimes you have to weigh down. I have always tried to weigh hard on the rights of the property owner. If you look at the prairie dog situation, it's a property issue in a lot of ways with our economic development. So, moving forward, I will do everything I could to find a solution on that particular area, but also to work to find solutions to protect property rights in all areas.
This question will be directed at you, Senator Anderson. In the last legislative session, you sponsored a bill protecting local agriculture, but you did not make it a misdemeanor for local police to enforce certain federal laws. Is that true, and will you explain that?
Can you rephrase? Can you?
Yeah, I'll say it again. In the last legislative session, you sponsored a bill protecting local agriculture. The first says, I would have also made it a misdemeanor for local police to enforce certain federal laws. Is that true, and will you explain that?
In the bill that I remember the bill. What's happening is you have the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, that's going into small local communities and shutting down farmers markets because people are growing lettuce and giving away or selling it to their neighbors. You have the FDA that's going in and criminalizing them for doing that because they're saying that they're a public health risk, but then when they test the food, they realize there's no risk. So I sponsored a bill this year to protect local agricultural producers from federal intrusion. And basically what the bill said is, it said if Utah agents ignore Utah laws, then we should have some teeth to that bill. One thing that I've heard overwhelmingly from constituents is we need to stop passing unanimous message bills with no teeth to it. So again, just going back to the rights of your individual rights, I believe that you should be able to grow a tomato in your backyard and give it to your neighbor if you want to. And right now, you can't do that. You can, but the FDA can come in and criminalize you for it. So I disagree with that. I feel like that's an issue that should have been dealt with a long time ago. The expansion of the federal government with the Interstate Commerce Clause, they have exceeded their power, and the state of Utah and other states have not exercised checks and balances with regards to that federal overreach.
I believe that was Senate Bill 34, is that correct? Senate Bill 34, if that would have passed, and it had passed in another state, I believe it was attempted to pass in another state, I believe it was Rhode Island, and they stopped it right at the last minute. If that bill would have passed, it would have made it, it was so violently opposed by the Farm Bureau, the Department of Agriculture, and the retail merchants and grocers that it never got a committee hearing. And so I know that the senator probably has some issues with that and would like to work on that in the future if he's successful in this. But the bottom line is that bill was not a good bill. And it was not successful because it was so opposed by the people he supposedly said was going to help.
The reason the bill didn't get brought before committee is because I'm not a fan of pushing legislation that there's a lot of opposition to necessarily. I think that we need to have an approach that works, that makes sense, and put forth bills that actually have a chance of getting passed. The Farm Bureau opposed it because their argument was if you've got pigs on a truck and half of them are going to Texas and the other half are staying here in the state of Utah, they felt like that would be overly burdensome to label the pigs that were staying here in Utah as made or grown in Utah. So that's why they opposed that bill. The reason that the other group opposed the bill is because they they don't support you guys being able to grow your own food and sell it. They want you to be forced through a monopoly to go to the grocery store and purchase that food. And the lobbyists who advocated against this bill are supporting my opponent's campaign because I'm trying to protect your property rights and your right to be able to be independent and self-reliant. So they did oppose that bill. I disagreed with it. I disagreed with their arguments about it. But that's why I didn't go before committee, is because I'm not a fan of pushing legislation that has that much opposition. There's enough low-hanging fruit. We don't need to be going after tough stuff like that.
You got less than 30 seconds.
I was just going to say, the Farm Bureau and Department of Agriculture definitely opposed that bill. Leonard Blackman, head of the Department of Agriculture, told me there's not enough lipstick to put on that bill. So he did not like it, and neither did the Farm Bureau. They were supposedly the ones who was going to help. They just didn't like it.
This next question will be directed at you, Mr. Vickers. The question is, a just released study from 2012 by Americans for the Arts provides evidence that nonprofit arts and culture is a $42 million industry in Iron County, supporting more than 1,000 full-time jobs and generating $3.8 million in local and state government revenue. A recent economic study delivered to the legislature last session shows that the Utah Shakespeare Festival creates economic impact of $35 million annually. In what way do you support or oppose the Utah Shakespeare Festival's effort to get state funding to help complete their new theater, expand their season, and increase its economic impact?
Anybody that's in this audience that's lived in these communities for very long realizes the impact that the arts has on our area. We're the festival city. The Shakespearean Festival, so many other things that drives that, things the arts associated with the university, with our schools, and other private enterprises. We can tell, we know what happens. Now, I can tell you what happens from the benefit of the Shakespearean Festival. When they do well, our businesses on Main Street do well. And so, I'm a businessman. I know the value of return on investment. When you put certain money in, amount of money into something, you get a return on investment, that's a positive thing. In this case, for me, it's a no-brainer. We need to push and do everything we possibly can to get money from every angle we can to get that theater built and get it under production, and get it going so that we can have additional benefits. A very conservative estimate showed that if the state would have given the festival $5 million last year, that would have been paid back in 5 to 7 years. That's a pretty dang good return on investment.
When the Shakespeare Festival funding request for $5 million came before my committee, the Business, Economic Development, and Labor Committee, it was very low on the priority list according to the chairs of the committee who created the priority list. I was successful in moving the largest, it was by far the largest funded project, $5 million request. The next largest request was $2 million, so Shakespeare was more than double the next largest request. I was able to successfully move it higher on the priority list, 4 or 5 spots over all the other non-governmental appropriations. When the priority list went before Executive Appropriations Committee, the House completely gutted the funding. And the argument that they made was, we can get money from Harry Reid, so we don't need to be appropriating it here. It was very difficult as a legislator to overcome that argument, especially in the state of Utah. But after the House gutted the funding completely, it came back over the Senate, and I made the amendment to restore $500,000 of the funding, which was the same amount that was given the year before with my predecessor. So I feel like it's important that we make decisions here in Iron County and understand the political ramifications of making those decisions so that our elected officials can do as good of a job as possible representing our Iron County and the rest of the district at the state level.
Just to add, he talked about some of the games going on. Yeah, there's some games that go on in the legislature. I'm not here to tell you there isn't. There were some games that were played with this funding on the Shakespearean Festival. The festival did everything right. Fred and Scott did everything right. They were there. They had people representing them. We did everything right on the House side. We worked and worked and worked. And they worked on the Senate side. And leadership decided to play some games with this because they were mad at SUU, unfortunately. You know, and so moving forward, though, we've developed the relationships and the rapport with leadership that they'll look at it differently in the future, and we'll do our very best to continue to get that. And we'll do a similar game plan that we had this year. We get there, we'll have a presence, and we'll fight for some dollars to bring back.
The other thing to note is that we had funding bills that came before us during the last week of session. And those funding bills used up the $439 million that we eventually appropriated. And if we would have had the courage and the strength to vote no on those new programs, then Shakespeare probably would have gotten funded. The Southwest Applied Technology Center would have received money to start planning their new building. So we need to prioritize. We can't say yes to all things, because then we have no leverage points to make arguments up at the Capitol. So we need to prioritize for what's best for Iron County, and not just say that we support everything that comes before us. And I feel like that's what I did when I was up at the Capitol fighting for the Shakespeare Festival.
All right, this next question will be directed to you, Mr. Anderson. The question is this: how important to you is public safety and the employees that make it happen?
Public safety is incredibly important to me. It's one of the proper roles of government. Criminal justice doesn't receive the funding that it should. That's one thing that government should be funding, is our law enforcement and our courts. So I absolutely support public safety. Again, we continue to fund new programs that take dollars away from criminal justice. And we need to prioritize our funding. So I absolutely support public safety, law enforcement, and our courts.
Thanks. You know, if there's a politician out there that doesn't support public safety, I really want to have a discussion with them. Any of you who that attended the Hospital Foundation fundraiser last night could have listened to Jason Thomas tell his story about being shot while he was on duty with the City City Police Department. I mean, that it brings it home to you as to what those guys go through. I've got a couple of nephews that serve in law enforcement, and I appreciate them. I appreciate everyone that's willing to do that and sacrifice. As a state representative and state senator, we have to look at a lot of aspects of criminal justice. We can look at the criminal justice system, the court system, the highway patrol. We don't have direct control over funding for local entities, the communities, the cities, and the counties. But we have to do everything we can to support that. This year we were fortunate. We were able to do some creative things and get 20 new highway patrol officers on the roads. We continue to work closely with the court system to make sure that they've got things that will help get people put behind bars, get them rehabilitated, and put them back out. So, yeah, definitely, without a doubt, I know that both of us support public safety very much.
This will be our final question, then we'll have closing statements. And Mr. Vickers, this question will be directed at you. How will you help with job creation in Iron County and the state?
Thanks. As we look at economic development in our area, look at the successes we've had and some of the failures we've had. On the big scale, trying to bring big companies in, we've had some wins. We've done that. We've had some wins with some companies, but if you look at the driving force behind economic development in the 3-county district that we're looking to represent, you realize that the unemployment rate is a little higher in our area than it is in others. The driving factor behind that is housing construction. Until we get the construction turned around, we're never going to be able to really drive that down. But how do we do that? Well, on the other side, we have to stimulate the economy to build up so that we can have the housing industry good. So what's the best way to do that? I argue that the best way to do it in our area is through small business development, small employers. You look at us. We started out in 1996 when we bought Bullock Truck. We had 8 employees. 5 of them were my wife and I and 3 of our kids. We now employ 50 employees. We have 4 businesses. We have a payroll of $1.5 million. Those are the kind of successes we have. You look at what Dave Grant's doing and John Bushwood mentioned the airplane. He's going to start producing. That's an expansion of his existing business. How's the best way to drive that? Drive down regulation. I'm in one of the most highly regulated businesses in the world with healthcare. We have to make sure that business regulation is lower, business taxes are fair, and move forward so that we can allow those businesses to expand and get more jobs into our area.
I have opened legislation to reduce and reform the personal property tax, and this question was brought up in the previous debate, so I want to make sure that I answer it. The way that the county receives funding is basically they have a three-pronged approach: sales tax, real property tax, and business personal property tax. And when one of them goes up, the other ones go down, vice versa. So the argument was made that if you lower the business personal property tax, the other will go up, and it will be a tax shift which will disproportionately affect the elderly and low-income families, and that's true. So let's solve the problem. Disconnect the business personal property tax from that formula so that when you reduce the business personal property tax, it's a tax cut rather than a tax shift. There's always hurdles when it comes to legislation and government, but what we need people who solve those hurdles, jump over them, and get solutions as far as it's concerned to our district that we're facing. So the business personal property tax, it doesn't make sense to go up to send a tax collector $30 an hour to go collect a 2-cent tax on a stapler that you use to run your business. If you want to help small businesses, then you reform and reduce the business personal property tax and other taxes and regulations that prohibit us from creating jobs.
We work hard to develop economic development with our community, whether it be from small businesses or large businesses working with GOED, Governor's Office of Economic Development, Spencer Eccles, and those that work in that area. Then we can expand the economy. When the economy expands, housing comes back, construction comes back. Now there's a couple of different ways. You can talk about regulation, you can talk about taxes. If you want to be specific, you can do that. But you can also understand the fact that as we drive this, those things come together and improve the economy. We get more tax base, we get more money coming in for various things, and that's the bottom line. But the bottom line is to help make a climate which allows those businesses to do what they do best: bring more employees in, grow the economy, whether it be tourism dollars, whether it be small business dollars like mine, whether it be large business dollars. Those all fit together, and when that puzzle fits together and those pieces come together, then you have success.
Spencer Eccles, the director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, came and presented before our committee, and he spoke for about 45 minutes on all the projects that he's got going around the state. And after he was done, I asked him a question. I said, do you have any projects scheduled for Iron County? What's in the works for Iron County? And I was anticipating him to list several things that they'd been working on. And he talked for about 15 more minutes without giving me a straight answer. And I asked him again. I said, let me clarify, do you have any projects scheduled for Iron County as far as the Governor's Office of Economic Development? And he said, no. I said, we have 8% unemployment in Iron County. There's 4% in Utah County. There's 4% in Davis County. Why are you focusing resources where they're not needed? So I think that we need to have more leadership. We need more accountability with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, because right now we're getting the short end of the stick.
I will now have closing statements, and Mr. Anderson, we'll have you go first.
Well, again, I'd just like to thank SUU. John, you've done a fantastic job hosting the debate. Also my opponent for being willing to debate. It's not easy to get up here and debate these difficult issues. We're both Republicans. For the most part, we share a lot of the same views. I do feel like I have different views than my opponent. For the last two elections, delegates in 2011, delegates overwhelmingly chose me with 62.5% of the vote. That was the same group of people who elected our previous senator. This year, delegates overwhelmingly elected me with almost 57% of the vote. They had 5 weeks to compare candidates side by side, and that's what they decided to vote on. And I appreciate the opportunity going to them directly, introducing myself, explaining what I'm passionate about, and explaining what I'll do for Senate District 28. And I think that's why they voted the way that they chose to vote. Now we're in a primary, and it's a whole different ballgame. I've spent many nights holding cottage meetings and speaking in small groups, and really listening to the concerns of the district and meeting a lot of new people. Turnout with primaries is incredibly low. You never know what's going to happen. But I promise to you that if I'm elected, I'll have an open ear. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your concerns. I do listen. I am conservative, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to ram something through that the majority of the district does not agree with. And I think that that's incredibly important that we put somebody up there who has a proven conservative track record. We're in the state of Utah. We're the most conservative state in the union. And we're in southern Utah, which is one of the most conservative parts of the state of Utah. And I think my score with the Utah Taxpayers Association, 92%. My opponent's is 70% lifetime over his entire voting record. Utah Grassroots deals with property rights, right to bear arms, and other issues. My legislative record is 94% lifetime. I appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
I as well appreciate everyone for being here. Appreciate SUU and for them hosting this. John, you guys have done a good job. I need thanks. And I appreciate my opponent. This hasn't been easy for us. We've disagreed on some things, and we're both conservative Republicans, but we disagreed on some things. That's okay. I tell you this though, I appreciate being in a primary because I have never felt bad when the people have the right to vote. And I think that you're having that with this primary gives us really a good chance to be a fine outcome. No matter who wins, it'll be a positive, good outcome. I've lived in this district my whole life. My family and I have loved this district. We live here, we've grown here. I've served in so many different capacities, both at church level, at political level, at community level, at youth level. I just have to give back. I've been blessed because of being here. We've grown businesses here. We've established our roots here. We've grown businesses from almost next to nothing to being successful. I pride myself on some things. I pride myself on being a fiscal conservative. That comes from my strong business background. I'm a strong supporter of education, both public ed and higher ed. If you don't believe me, just ask those people that I've worked with the last 4 years. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm an NRA member, a current and active member, have been for some time. I'm a concealed weapon permit holder. Those are things that are important to me. We enjoy hunting in the outdoors. I support local control. I believe strongly in that local control, that I believe our people at the local level can do a better job than others. I propose that if I'm able to be elected, that I want to move forward with some things and take care of. I want to better prepare kids to be able to go to college. I want to lower class sizes. You know how you do that? You do it by getting more aids, those types of things. Bottom line is, I want to give back. Give me the opportunity to serve, and I'll continue to do the best job I possibly can.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and appreciate the questions. I know that we were not able to get to every question. The candidates have volunteered to be here until about 9 o'clock tonight. If you have other questions you'd like to ask it directly, please do that. Thanks again for the City Council for coming. I understand you just got out of an incredibly long budget meeting. So thank you so much.